Okay, great. Ralph, it's nice to meet with you. Thanks for joining me here today for this interview with Common Ground about the Lotus Ecovillage.
Well, thanks for the welcome, Zola. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, it was really fantastic to find an eco village here in New Zealand, and that you're in this process of developing. And I looked at your website, and it looks fantastic. There's just really so much beautiful intention, values. I can really see it's going to be a beautiful place when it's finally built. But I thought the reason why I'm connecting with you is because Common Ground does regenerative human settlements, and that's what an eco-village is about. And we are all about enabling people and Aotearoa to be able to have more of these kinds of residential communities. And it's really important for people to see that there is stuff going on and to hear from others how they are doing it so that others can follow in the footsteps. It sometimes is easier when the road is being paved by others to follow along that path and be able to get the best practices and lessons learned and some of the hints and tips and things like that. So Common Ground is about being able to share all that information, who's doing what, and follow along on those journeys. And so I see Lotus Ecovillage is interested to share a little bit about what you've been up to, and you've got a website so people can see a little bit more there. But I thought let's start with you. I'm quite interested to know a little bit about if you can share with us your role there at Lotus Ecovillage, why you got involved in this project, and what interests you about ecovillages in general.
Sure. So the Lotus and the Lotus Ecovillage is being kind of created out of the Lotus Yoga Centre. Now, the Lotus Yoga Centre started in Wellington in 1971. I became involved soon after that for a few years. And then sort of life took me in a different direction. But the yoga centre kind of followed me. So I'd moved up the coast from Wellington up to the Kapiti coast. And in 1985, the Lotus Yoga Centre established itself at Paraparumu. I was at Paikokariki. And then I gradually got more involved. At the time, I was raising a family. So by 2000, we had created a sanctuary. And the sanctuary is really the heart of the centre, the yoga centre. And I mention that because I'll come back to that in a minute. Then in the early 2000s, I joined the executive committee, chair of the committee, and I've held that position ever since. And in 2011, we had a number of sort of crises hit us with a possible resignation from the director of the yoga centre, who was the founder. I had to talk him out of that. And we had a considerable debt to the director, which wasn't being paid back, so it was accumulating, compounding interest and all that sort of thing. The actual villa was deteriorating, hadn't really had anything spent on it for a long number of years. It's a 100-year-old villa or so. We'd put on the property a cottage for domestic use, and the villa was used for the centre. And so with wiring and things like this, a whole range of different personnel, we had to suddenly look, what could we do to resolve these issues, which are, hinged around money. And we had 8.5 acres. More than half was bush clad and a hillside, or a valley with hills up the side of the valley. But we did have some flat land where the orchard was, on both sides of the villa. So we and it was made up of 4 titles. So with those things in mind, I kind of started a property development process, which I'm not a property developer. And so we started, creating a plan, exploring options, but I couldn't get the full support of the committee, a few cold feet. So that I would regularly bring up the possible solution, but it was very challenging, and I don't blame people for sort of being reticent. But by 2016, 2017, the crises began to sort of really come to a head. And by that stage, I talked to one of my brothers who was a property developer, or he had done some property developing. He was a businessman and entrepreneur. And it happened to coincide, my problems coincided with a stage in his life where he was looking to do something a bit different. He'd wanted to do more extensive property development, and he thought, yes, well, this could be a golden opportunity to create a bit of synergy. And so he was able to, with help of his very clever people, come up with a scheme. And the scheme involved swapping land for a building. So we gave him the land, he gave us, or was giving us back, and with enough money to pay back debt. So in essence, that's how we've managed to get the basic facilities or basic kind of structure as a feasible option going forward. So then he had past business experience in ecosystems, kind of solutions. And so he put those ideas to work to create an eco-village. So
okay, when you say to create an eco-village, that's sort of the plan for one, because it is still at the ground level at the moment. So putting together the concept of an eco-village.
Well, since 2017 to now, we're about 2 years behind our initial sort of dream. We a little bit more than on the ground floor. We've moved up a couple of floors, but we've still got a couple to go. So we've got a /yoga center built, and we've got 4 houses built with 5 more being constructed. There's nobody actually moving in yet because the services got delayed. Your installation of services delayed by COVID-19. Now, just going back, I mentioned earlier that we've centered our whole project around the sanctuary. That's the one building that will remain, which is situated by a man-made pond, and it's sort of been created as quite a beautiful space, and it's really the heart of the yoga center. And the yoga center is being reconstructed sort of adjacent to it. So services are being installed as we speak, and they should be finished within a few weeks. And at that stage, the new center and everything will be ready to move into. And so 4 houses will be ready to move, be occupied. Suddenly burst into life. It'll be like the lotus flower.
Wow, yes, that's actually coming quite soon. And I actually have a lot of questions regarding sort of the ins and the outs and all those details that other people might like to have around that moving in piece, and who are they? And I have a lot of questions, as I'm sure anybody who's watching this video will have about that. And I thought then it would be really great to have a more in-depth session where we can share with other people who really want to delve into this, who love the idea of this eco-village, who either want to develop like you have. I can see you've gone through many hoops to get to this point. There's no one A to B direct route, and that is something really helpful for people to really hear the things that you've had to tweak, the curves that you've gone around to get to this place. And so I just wanted to offer anybody who's listening to this at the moment that we will be having a chance to dive a lot deeper if people are like me, have a lot of questions. But I wanted to go back to even what is an eco-village, because some people might even have heard the term before, but maybe aren't so clear. And I thought I'd just start, because I'm actually really familiar with eco-villages. I did an eco-village design education course with the Global Eco-Village Network back in 2012. I was living on an emerging eco-village in South Africa, and I really wanted to build that capacity. And so I got sponsored by Lush, which at the time was sponsoring the training for people to be able to go through this eco-village design education. And it was held in South Africa for 4 weeks. We had a live-in opportunity in terms of how we were co-creating community as well. So it was a living and learning experience. And so I thought I'd share about what the Global Ecovillage Network says about eco-villages, just so that we can have a basis by which to go to understand what this term means, at least to the Global Ecovillage Network. So just quickly, the Global Ecovillage Network, their mission is to catalyze communities for a regenerative world. They envision a world of empowered citizens and communities, designing and implementing pathways to a regenerative future while building bridges of hope and international solidarity. So the term eco-village is quite broad within Jen's definition, allowing for many different kinds of communities and projects to be recognized as an eco-village, because they're all designed by people where they are living according to their vision and the culture and the interests and the land and all of those dynamics. But there are 3 core practices that are shared by all of these that make them regenerative communities. And again, this is Jen's definition. So the first one is being rooted in local participatory processes. The second, integrating social, cultural, economic, and ecological dimensions in a whole systems approach to sustainability, and actively restoring and regenerating their social and natural environments. So that's what the 3 core that any eco-village, no matter what it looks like, whether it's literally a traditional village in, let's say, Ghana or Senegal, to what we might find here in Aotearoa or Europe. And then I thought I'd just clarify as well what an eco-village is not, again, according to Jen, which is it is not a particular outcome. So it's not like when it's all built, then it's done, but it is an ongoing process. So it's a living and learning center for a regenerative future, a place of continuous exploration. Eco-villages are not designed by outside developers, architects, and experts, but by community themselves. Of course, that would be most likely in partnership, because I think at some point all those people would be needed to be brought in, but they're not the ones that are leading it. And then eco-villages do not focus solely on ecology, even though the word is eco-village. They do encompass the social, cultural, economic dynamics as well. And last but not least, the eco-villages are not islands for the rich and the middle class. So they have opportunities for people of all walks of life to be able to be a part. So I was wondering within that, Ralph, I don't know whether you had a chance to read, know Jen's definition, but whether that fit within what Lotus Ecovillage finds to be a definition for your community, and any differences that Lotus might have from that definition.
Sure. Well, we tick most of those boxes. I think probably we tick them all to a greater or lesser extent. Perhaps when it comes to what an eco-village isn't, I'll come to in a minute. But we've evolved or grown out of the Lotus Yoga Centre, which is a well-established community-oriented, community-focused initiative to bring, I guess, health and well-being to humans, to us. And we need a healthy environment for that. So the yoga centre's been practicing organic agriculture or horticulture for all the years it's been there, which are many. We've got people at the centre of the yoga centre come eco-village. And so the eco-village will envelop or wrap itself around the yoga centre. So that will provide a cultural kind of social centre for what and how we live together. No one has to practice yoga to live there. Really, they need, to sign up to the sustainability goals, ecologically and socially, environmentally, financially, of course. And of course, when we come to the finance, when you were talking about what an eco-village isn't, we can have all the ideals in the world and aspirations and so on, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to afford to live there. And in New Zealand, that's a difficult path to create, what the government was calling, affordable housing. Affordable housing in New Zealand is kind of an oxymoron, unfortunately. So that's been our biggest struggle, is how to achieve that goal.
Yeah, you're right. In New Zealand, there is a lot of financial and policy related things that keep that affordability out of reach for those who really need to be able to have those mechanisms in place. And so just a little note of hope here is that I'm on the committee of the Society for Alternative Housing Development, and we've got a subcommittee around housing policy in order to be able to help with the community-led or community-focused housing aspect of it. So we are writing a white paper. We're making policy recommendations to our government officials. And so I think perhaps even within the next 6 months, between this government and whoever gets elected in September, we're going to be pushing we're making relationships as well with people who can make these changes. And we're really going to be pushing these asks, these policy asks, that are really truly helping the community-led and the affordable housing movement happen, so that places that are community-led communities can accommodate for a wide range of financial people from different financial walks of life. So I think coming soon, we're going to see this.
Right. So about a fifth of the cost, which is 20%, that's huge. That's external costs. GST, of course, is a given. That's 15%. Then you've got development levies, reserve contributions. You've got resource consent requirements. 10 reports, or consultants have to provide reports, all of which come at about $10,000 a pop. So and then even then you get down the path, and the latest thing we've come up against is that we've got a stream running through our property, and we've built a bridge over the stream. It's 5 meters wide. It could have been 3 meters, but we designed, for ease and good, healthy use. And actually, you cross the bridge and you immediately turn left or right. But because it's 5 meters, Transit New Zealand require it to meet the standard of a road or bridge operating at 80 kilometers an hour. Well, if you went any faster than 5 kilometers an hour, you wouldn't be able to turn left or right. You'd crash into the bank on the other side or the hillside. So that's going to cost us an extra $40,000. I mean, that's just crazy.
And these are the things where if there's an advocacy group, which we are at the moment, sort of more consolidating ourselves, then this is where we can have an intermediary to say, really, it's not black or white. It's not a road just because it's 5 meters. It's actually a walking bridge that's wide enough, for an emergency vehicle if needed. And we cannot just apply the same rules that typical development would use. And so we need almost like an ombuds or an intermediary. We need some of that policy that allows for this within reason and within the context of the community. So thanks for pointing that out, these nitty-gritty things that actually need to be highlighted by the government policymakers who are dealing with these consents and things that are restricting community from moving forward. Because if you don't have the money, or you don't have maybe the time or the human resource to be able to follow this kind of thing up and pursue it, it could just halt. Just something simple like this could halt a big piece of the development. So I hope
another example would be that every house has to have a carport. Well, we don't intend for every house to own a car. And just on the news a few days ago was a couple in Wellington who wanted to build another house on their land. They had a house and enough land for a second house because they wanted to call community. They were going to build a $200,000 house, but they had to spend $200,000 to put in a carport or garage, because in Wellington the bylaw says every new house has to have a car park off the road.
Oh yeah, and this is one of those things that co-housing design is normally in such a way that the houses are to the periphery of the community, and just walking paths are made to all of the houses. So I know Earth Song has somehow gotten around that. And so that's what other co-housing communities are. We're going to need to look to each other, communities that have already formed, see how they got through those hoops and be able to just replicate that in whatever area that people are forming their community. So, well, again, I think going a little bit more into those details of specifics of the challenges and figuring out where we can get through those is going to be definitely fodder for a great next. I would like to actually run it as a workshop so that people can ask questions and it be interactive. So let's, I thank you very much for those examples. I wanted to just touch on 2 or 3 more points here, and then we'll leave the rest for that longer session. So the next, so again, regenerative is, as I read in the beginning around that definition, it really does talk to that social and ecological and economic piece of our society, our country, or even our world that really does need to be healed and done differently. How would you say that Lotus Ecovillage from a microcosm perspective is able to do some of that influencing on that macrocosm?
Well, yeah, one of our intentions always from the start, particularly with my brother who has taken this on as a project, you know, is to provide the Ecovillage as a society. So that kind of thinking is very much, you know, what we were, you know, are going to be on about. But when you think about regenerative design, you know, once upon a time we used to live in caves, and we were close to nature. We had a healthy environment. We lived a healthier lifestyle, obviously. Maybe had different kinds of threats to survival. Things were great. We then got too many humans for caves, so we started building houses, and so houses were built out of the environment. And you know, after many generations and a few thousand years, we arrived at the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly, you know, the whole tilt of society became more, I think, financially oriented, economically oriented, you know, and we started making choices that were financial rather than environmental. And then, of course, after the Second World War, suburbia took off and we became even more unsustainable. And so we've now got a society, in many ways a global society with, you know, 8 heading towards 10 billion people. And so change isn't going to be easy. But we're wanting to be, you know, lead the way and provide an alternative to that kind of living by creating, you know, the Ecovillage in a way that is regenerative. You know, we have principles of permaculture and lifestyle choices that are going to make it sustainable. And it's all about sustainability and how can we provide an environment and a living environment, which is, okay, isn't going to be digging out holes in the ground and living in caves, but, you know, as an environment where we can live comfortably.
Yeah, more in harmony with nature.
Yeah, but we're going to incorporate eco-design so that, you know, we make best use of the sun, passive design, building products or you know, ecologically sourced material for building and construction, energy production. We have aiming to have our own power source, you know, with wind and sun. So all these things are going to make it a regenerative kind of community.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question, which is, you know, what is the kind of purpose of eco-villages overall? And really, I think what I hear from what you're saying is that really it's that ability to be able to, on a smaller scale, do the kind of housing development that we know is possible in, if we just have a series of villages that are scattered about the country, it is possible to do this on a bigger scale. When I say bigger, I mean, more of eco-villages rather than, 1,000-house communities. But if we look at this eco-village model and we can see that it does solve all of these problems that we have in our society, for me, it's a call to action for those who are in government and funders, investors, those who actually have a role to play in this, to jump on board and be part of this movement, because it means that they can be part of the solution by supporting eco-villages, which have all of those elements of sustainability embedded within them, from the social, cultural, ecological, and even economic. So yeah, I think there's so much that we solve in the problems of the world by developing eco-villages, which is why I'm really keen on supporting them. And so just on that note, for the future of eco-villages in New Zealand, are you hopeful that it is something that we're going to see more of? What do you think is going to be needed to make us have more eco-villages here?
Oh, well, I think we've touched on those kind of ideas already, but for sure we want to see a society, New Zealand society being more sustainable, and it can't carry on putting these vast sort of urban ghettos where the price of land is so high that to maximize that price you have to build a house that's 230 square meters. So our houses are designed to be small, and using best use of space, reduces the cost, of course. So that will make it easier for other eco-villages. If we're leading the way, we have design principles that can be demonstrated. And we're going to have some of the answers to the problems, and we'll be aiming to share those kind of ideas.
Well, that's great. I'd be happy with Common Ground to help to build that network stronger and help to share more of those. That's why I'm doing this interview with you. I'm connected in some way, in some small way, to a lot of different entities that are doing housing, from in my own region, the Waikato Regional Housing Initiative, which brings together about 40 different organizations and role players somehow involved with housing. I'm speaking with local government New Zealand. They've also got a housing component to wanting to do housing differently and support housing. There's Kainga Ora, which is our Housing New Zealand, that wants to do housing differently as well. We've got Papa Kainga toolkits that have been developed that could be modified for land that is not Maori land. And then we've got the Society for Alternative Housing Development that I mentioned to you as we're working on policy. We also have, I'm sitting on the committee for the Society for Cooperative Housing, and cooperative housing is another means to make housing affordable and of house ownership. So it's just a few of those things that I thought are really important, that all these different role players know about what is an eco-village and what are the important reasons why we want to look at eco-village development, so that no matter what house entity, whether it be Habitat for Humanity, Papa Kainga, or Kainga Ora, that they consider the values and the participatory approach and the ethics of the eco-village can be done under any of those other entities. So your story, you sharing what you're doing, how you're doing it, is really, I think, important for others to see and chime in. Very important. So I'll be spreading this interview far and wide. Hopefully people will be inspired to check out your website as well, see more of what's going on there. So just
we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
We're in a stage of growth. So we've got 4 houses about to be occupied. We've got another 5 being built, and then we've got people already queuing up. But we're going to be building 25 to 30 houses. So we want to be able to sustain that growth through the whole process. And any help that you can give, like you just described, would be most appreciated. And we really, really do appreciate what you're aiming to do with Common Ground. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, because there's so much that the housing community in New Zealand can learn from you and what you're doing, and so much that you need from the housing community to really just make it that much easier for it to be successful, because that's what we want, is this kind of housing community to be successful.
Well, I think we've missed the boat on getting help in that regard. We're already in the current kind of regime. The paradigms that we're dealing with, though outdated, we have to just, suck it up. But yes, if we can contribute to better ways of creating societies or communities in the future, then, we will have achieved one of our fundamental aims, which is to help others.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, we'll end our interview here, but this is not the end of us. As I said, we're going to be having, I think, an in-depth where people have caught the fire. This is a really great idea, and in some way they want to be able to be a part of it to help it grow. And so we'll be advertising that opportunity in the near future. I've got a Common Ground newsletter. You have your website. They can find us through those channels. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining today, Ralph, and sharing about the Lotus Ecovillage.
Thanks, Zola. It's been a pleasure.